Drink with James, episode, tell me.
34.
34. Tim, just keep it. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is at the end of the episode. Tim is making me film the intro at the end because we just started talking. We just kind of like jammed into it. So we have Justin Bridges, an amazing photographer. Not someone who I'm going to say like of blank Instagram account. You're going to hear shortly that he's kind of been down a different path, but incredible guy. Worked at Goldman, worked at Saks, worked at J. Crew. Literally seemed to work everywhere.
Yeah,
worked
it seems
at almost.
like it.
I think he maybe worked for a 4Card. I don't know. But we've been drinking and talking for an hour, and now I'm filming the intro. So you probably will cut next, and there'll be ice in our glass. So there's no visual continuity. But we're excited to. Well, I can't say we're excited to jump into it because we already jumped into it. But you guys should be fucking excited for us to jump into it. Cheers.
For those of you who don't know my story, I worked at Goldman Sachs out of college. I was a
You guys heard of that?
Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, it's just a little
small
firm.
firm.
It's a family bank.
It's a family business,
Yeah, you guys really like to think about
it's totally small. And so I did trading for 2 years during the crisis of 08 to 2010. And when I left, I kind of I didn't know what to do. I knew I wanted to shoot, but I was like, I'm not just gonna leap into shooting. I still gotta make money. I still gotta have healthcare and benefits. So the first thing I did, I interned at a showroom. What a weird experience to go from here to
right.
getting paid nothing. And so I interned at a showroom. I asked her, could I shoot some of her brands and stuff like that for free, just to get some practice. And then from there, I had a temp agency staff me at J. Crew. I worked in planning. I was doing a great job, so they moved me to merchandising with the buying team. And then from J. Crew, I ended up getting picked up with the help of a personal shopper at Saks. So still spending money like I was at Goldman. I ended up getting a cool recommendation to an HR person who put me into a super day. I nailed the job. They hired me into their executive excellence training program to become a buyer or planner. So I worked at Saks for 2 years in Saks.com. Meanwhile, the econ business was blowing up.
Right. And are you shooting all the while as well?
No,
still?
Well, I was shooting in the background. So
yeah.
Every time I took a fashion job, I said, look, I really want to be able to go to Fashion Week. Part of the reason you hired me was because I had this blog.
Right.
I started the blog as soon as I left Goldman. So
right.
I made sure that everybody that I worked for knew that I was taking photos and sort of getting immersed into that culture. Mm-hmm. And luckily, I had a lot of great bosses that were like, you can't be gone a lot, but if you want to try to steal away for a show or two or whatever, fine, as long as you get your
right.
work done. So I'd work late nights, but I leave during the day, catch a few shows, take some street style shots, and on weekends I shoot around Soho for fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm building all these contacts. I'm meeting editors while shooting street style. I'm working at J. Crew, Saks Fifth Avenue, meeting other buyers, meeting other salespeople that are in the business. And at smaller brands, salespeople are connected to social media people, so it's such a small world. And then I went and worked.
Especially at that time, it was still new, and it was just
so new.
There was
especially menswear.
There was 50 people
in
the world.
Even gave a shit about menswear. I don't think menswear was so small.
I mean, menswear didn't really exist.
Yeah,
you know,
we were still buying stuff.
J. Crew had just come out with the Ludlow.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it was like, this is like a suit that
I remember
fits.
when liquor store opened, I was like, holy shit, somebody cares. So then I worked at a PR company where I had other brands where I like working directly with designers. And then my last job was with the sartorialist, Scott Schumann, and we traveled to Europe and that was my first time going to European fashion.
And he was he's the OG,
huge,
you know?
And he's still the OG, you know?
He really feels like he invented that style of
100%.
85 or 50 mil, 1-2, kneel down,
very low down,
shoot up,
you
know? And that style, that is still
it's not going
the pervasive
anywhere.
style
totally.
of street style.
And it's still a beautiful photo.
Yeah.
So I met, you got to imagine, I organized the Lunch for 25 at Pitti in Florence, right?
I remember.
And so I'm meeting so many people, and I'm everywhere I go, I save an Excel spreadsheet of emails and writing notes about who I had a good connection with, all these things, right? And so when it was finally time to go out on my own, even though I wasn't quite ready, I embraced it. I just emailed every single editor that I met. I was like, hey, I'm in New York, you're in New York, you don't look like you have a street style person that will do it off season. Let me at least get a shot, let me walk in there. Right. And that's where it started, street style for me. And then everything after that, when I decided I don't want to be a street style photographer, I want to be at some point one of the big guys. I want to be shooting the ads that you see on top of La Esquina, you know? Yeah. When I decided I wanted to go that route, I literally every single season would go on like a Liberty trade show website, or for those of you who goes to trade shows like Project for Men's, Liberty, and I would take the brands list, even if it was info at, I'd put it all on a spreadsheet, and then like I was at Goldman, I'd just like literally start executing on email. I'd email people with like general form if I knew somebody. I'd attach photos that I thought that were relevant to the brand. I would just go on a blitz every single quarter and email new brands that I didn't know and see if they had a fit, or even if they wanted me to do something for like almost close to free, like I would do it if it was the right brand.
Right.
And so I think the cold email, the cultivating of friendships and really connecting with people in your network and building a real relationship, not one that's based on I want you to pay me, like was probably the best thing that I could have done at that time.
Cheers to that, too.
Oh, cheers.
Cheers to that. I mean, I think, I'm gonna drink. I started on Wall Street. You need a refill. I started on Wall Street too.
Yeah.
Right? And I was making 180 phone calls a day, or you could have 3 hours of talk time. You know, those are the two things. You had to have one of the two to leave the office, right? But like, I did that same cold emailing of brands. And Forecard, this whole fucking office is built on cold emails, basically, you know? And I think there's just not enough people that realize that like you can hustle your way into at least a base level of success, you know?
100%.
And you got to have the goods to back it up.
Yeah.
And you have to actually be decent.
You can go one round, because if you do one round, that's not enough rounds for people to say, don't work with that kid again.
Right.
So if you are average, you can at least get your foot in the door.
Yeah, they'll
then
try
build
you.
greatness around yourself.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
And how long were you kind of on that hustle? And it sounds like this is just who you are.
This
right,
is just,
I'm sure you still have Excel
I mean,
sheets.
You got this too. I mean, I think it's funny. A lot of people say, if you could go back, would you work at Goldman again? Would you sacrifice 2 to 4 years of your life going to other different jobs to?
Because you were all over the place. I didn't know the whole scope of it.
Oh yeah,
like you were all over.
I've tried a lot of things, or I've done a lot of things in order to situate myself to a place I felt comfortable. Starting in photography, and it's like the one thing I would not go back and change was working at Goldman, because out of all the things I learned in college, which are awesome, you cannot replace sort of the soft skills of being a hustler, staying in late, even when you don't need to be there, not being afraid to pick up the phone and call another trader and just have him rip your heart out. Like when you've seen that kind of failure like up front, and that determines whether or not you make money below the 6-figure level or you get propelled into the future. Like I don't have a choice. Like I have a lifestyle that I want to live. And so hustling is the only way to get there.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's so funny when you're on, I mean, I think this is I'm glad the conversation is going this way, because when you're on the other side of it, you know, as a CEO of this company, I get emailed every day 20 or 30 times by salespeople trying to sell me just shit, you know? Mostly development companies in like Uzbekistan, you know? But there's some other random stuff.
Yeah.
There is no one I like disparage as a salesperson for hitting me up.
Right.
Influencers that email me constantly that are like, I have a question, I want to meet with you, this or that. Like, it's the persistence.
Right.
You know, I may be too busy to get to your first or second email, I might miss it. But your third one, I'm going to be like, you know what? Like, I'm going to answer this.
Yeah.
And I do think that like people they're put off by cold emailing.
Right.
But I mean, I've made great relationships throughout my career through it. I'm
100%.
sure you're still working with clients probably that you connected with on a cold email.
Totally.
Because you think about the other way they have to find you is they have to have an idea in mind that they want to do. Then they have to find your account, and then they have to find your email. Then they have to reach out.
Yeah.
And then they have to offer
steps.
you the job.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
It's like, you know, if anybody who's ever worked in e-com, and maybe some of the people watching might have worked in a retail business, but like when you sit in the dev meetings for like e-com sites, the number one question is like, how do we get somebody from seeing the item to purchasing it in the least amount of steps? Yeah. And that's how getting business works. Like if somebody has to go 6 layers to reach out to you, it's not happening, because they're not going to reach out to you via DMs on your Instagram. Not likely.
No, not a brand.
You know, they want to email you or call you.
Right.
And so that means they have to see you on Instagram, spot you an editorial you shot or some work you did vis-a-vis another brand or something.
Have an opportunity in mind.
Yeah, have an opportunity in mind, because if they don't think, oh, I've got the thing that'll be perfect for this person, you're going to sit in the Rolodex of 20 other people that might be great for a job in the future.
Plus, I think if you email someone and it's like, okay, you've emailed this person and they're like, hey, I don't have anything now. But then they feel they're like, I've got this this thing.
Yeah.
I want to do right by this
buzz
person.
starts.
It's right
Yeah.
there, you know. And then I can't. How many times this has happened to me? Where like then a week later you're in a meeting, you're like, oh,
Know the person.
someone just
perfect
emailed
person.
me.
Yeah.
I got the guy.
Totally.
You know.
Totally.
And I think even as a big influencer, so like you're now, you know, successful photographer,
Yeah.
like by all accounts. And I know you're not nearly as successful as you want to be.
No,
I assume, since I've
course
known
not.
you.
Never.
So until we see you above La Esquina or on the cover of Vogue, I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
you won't be stopping anytime soon. But like, yeah, do you have any big, let's not give away this year, but in the last year, did you have any big clients that you were like, I want to bag this, and you hustled for it, you got it, and it felt like, okay, I've like made that step?
Yeah, I think I'll go with two. One of my favorite clients, even though it's not particularly like the style that I shoot if I was going to go out and do something artistic, is UGG. So I shoot social stuff for UGG, and it's been one of the most like fun and sort of creative in sort of the more organic way. Like here's like 6 shoes we want to push for fall. Think about a way that we can embody these tenets of our brand, or this thing that's hot right now, or this part of culture, and you work it up. Like we love to see what you think and how you would put it together. And even though it's not edgy fashion stuff I'm shooting, at least I get to use my brain. And that was something that was cultivated over like going to Coachella with them a long time ago as literally a photographer.
Yeah, I didn't remember that.
That shot for Stylecaster, not even for UGG.
Yeah.
So it was like, you know, I made friends with them and kept following up, and that's been a really fun project to work on. And then the other fun thing that I feel very fortunate about is Barney's. Mm-hmm. Barney's was somebody who actually came to me to purchase an image, like just to buy an image from me for their street style like roll up.
Right.
So I didn't even have any contact there, and I figured out some way to connect with them on the other side of the other side of the business. And I've been doing shoots for the window. Me and Sean have a series called A Drink With that we shoot different influential people, not in an Instagram way, but in like the director of Mocha, LA. We shot Zach Woods from Silicon Valley, and that has been like, again, I keep on saying things that aren't in the realm of things I shoot fashion wise, but like in terms of like success and like fun, really like get you pumped up, like that kind of stuff is really fun. Yeah, because we're pitching the idea like. This idea could grow even bigger, but we pitched the idea like we want to get people drunk. We had to cut it down. We want to get people drunk and have them answer fucking honestly. Yeah. Like tell me you didn't like your last collection and don't bullshit me. Yeah. And that was the premise of it. We didn't necessarily get that far, but the idea to get people to actually be candid and to open up and have a drink with us, like that was super exciting. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's part why this has worked. I think this show is that like influencers, they're looking for these answers and nobody's fucking talking about 100%. It, right? I want to step back just really quick and like let's start to focus this conversation on some more of the audience that's watching. And like UGG is a great example. Shooting for UGG, like obviously it's a brand that has like had some image issues, or they're trying to change. They're trying to expand their.
They're trying to dial it in.
Yeah,
everything's changed.
Dial it in, expand it. Right, like version. They're gonna always sell that boot. Yeah, but they need to show other things. So like, this is a similar brief that an influencer would get. Right, UGG would reach out to them and be like, hey, I want you to shoot. This new jacket or this new kind of boot we have. How are you thinking about that? What tips can you give somebody that's taking their own photos to kind of elevate the things that they're doing?
For sure. So it's funny, I actually apply the same logic that I used to do in all my corporate jobs. When a boss comes down and says, we need to understand how our business is suffering and whatchamacallit, I actually go in and sort of analyze it in a way, qualitatively mostly because I don't have the sales numbers. But like when UGG says like we want to roll out like these 6 styles that nobody really has put their finger on yet because we're still selling this one really well, I actually like talk to them and get really close to them and understand who is your client, like who is it that you're trying to sell to that's not the classic girl or the classic guy. Who is the guy like me? Is he like Tim? Is he like you? Like how do you actually see this person? And I get in and I actually do a full like deck. They send me a deck that like where they want to go. Yeah. And I put together a deck on what I think would be the most logical step. I guess because honestly the only way, unless you're crushing it, like you have, I don't know what the numbers are for you, but like you have 1 million followers or something, and people come to you and say, hey, I need you to do this.
Just do your thing, exactly. Yeah.
otherwise, you kind of have to instill that trust. You have to instill that feeling that you got your eye on the ball. And so I put together a deck that says, like, here are the images out on the internet that I think we could shoot that would sort of pivot the brand, but also still keep your signature style intact. Here's how I think we should shoot it. I even, like the last pitch I did, I created 3 characters that didn't exist. And I said, these are the guys that I think that are a bridge between what you have now, sort of the cool factor that I might have, and a guy that's just still picking up GQ to figure out how to dress.
Right.
And I create these characters and I say, like, this is what we should execute on. I can find people that look like this and feel this way, and let's shoot this way. So I think it's about having sort of a cogent idea, and then building around that cogent idea so everybody can see where your head's out. I remember, you might have had this too. When you were in banking, did you ever get brain teasers when you went to interviews? Mm-hmm. So one of the things you learn when you interview in banking is they ask you these ridiculous questions you can't answer.
Right.
And a lot of the questions that you can't answer, if you don't say anything, you are marked against real hard.
Yeah.
But if you show them how you're thinking, people want you.
Tries to get you your problem solving.
Exactly.
Skills.
And I think that's what I think brands do want that. I mean, I watched another episode before I came in, and one of the things you were telling people was, I can't believe how many people don't pitch.
Yeah.
And I think that's showing your thought process. Like if you come to a brand and say, I really love these shoes, I have a following of XYZ, can you send them over and maybe you could pay me a little bit? Then a brand will pick and choose, like maybe we want to work with you, maybe we don't.
Yeah.
But if you say, hey, look, that pair of shoes really vibes with me. I have the perfect idea. I'm actually going on a trip to wherever the fancy place you're going as a blogger.
Yeah.
And I have a friend that's traveling with me that would be the most gorgeous model. We're gonna shoot on the beach, and we're gonna shoot it by the pool, so you can see that it's got a little bit of flexibility, versatility, and then you show them that whole thought process. There's no way they won't. Well, there's chances they won't go with you, but the likelihood
they'll be impressed
increases.
regardless. And, and I cannot stress, guys, this is not normal. We work with hundreds and hundreds of bloggers a year. We pay out millions of dollars to influencers on 4Card. That's not normal, but it is so valuable. Yeah. And I think just taking the time, the little bit of extra time, you know, the influencers I know that are successful, that are making 2 or 3 times the amount of money that someone at other people at their level are making, are doing those kinds of things. You know, and it's because they're reliable, because they have good business mind, because they're thinking things through, they're taking this seriously. You know, if a brand is paying you $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000, like that is a lot of money regardless.
For anybody.
It is a lot of money, you know, and it's, for a small brand, you know, even for a 4Card, you know, Tim's marketing budget this year, you know, we might have 20 grand. So like to pay someone $2,000 is a decent amount of what we can spend for the entire year. And for you to be like laissez-faire about it and to be like, yeah, sure, I can do that, sounds good, and not think about it. Yeah. It's disrespectful to the brand. Exactly. You know, and I think putting that time in and putting a deck in, that kind of thing is so impressive. And it's something that, you know, the next time even if they say no, which they might, because it might not be the right time.
You're gonna get a lot more no's than you get yeses, but the yeses will be so much better.
You know, the sandals you want to shoot on your tropical vacation, maybe they're not selling well and that they're not, they're stepping away from them, but they're like the next time. They might reach out to you and be like, you're the guy, you know? And I think it's so important. And to your point of earlier when you said most of my shoots are, they're not artists, they're mercenary. You know, I still pick up the camera every now and then. I'm going on a ski trip with my family, and I talked to Jay Lindeberg, which was one of the first brands I ever worked with. I shot Liam in that overcoat and everything. And you know, I was just like, hey, thank you. I was like, hey, I'm going up to Lake Placid. You have ski stuff. If you want me to shoot it, my family needs some ski stuff. I'll shoot it. Just send me what you want. They're like, cool, we want like some shots by the fire and this and that, and like you do your thing, but like this stuff would be great. It's like, cool, I could do 100%. That. You know, like, and they appreciate that because like they weren't getting that stuff shot otherwise. So like, especially if you have trips and stuff, think about the brands that could make sense for it. Pitch them, like,
I'll even contextualize this. So one thing, back to the money thing, spending $2,000 is a big deal for almost everybody, because if you think about it, I remember I read a survey for photographers. I forget what the organization was that did it. It was a photography organization. But the average photographer across the United States in 2000, I think
you got to fly.
In 2015 or 2015, made on average $55,000, which is a living wage in a lot of places. would never turn an eye at that. I want the 55, right?
Right.
And I want to do way better. But 55,000. Now, if you take this $2,000 shoot that only took you maybe 4 hours, 3 hours to do, an hour to edit, that's a lot of money to spend on somebody that there's so many people doing it, right? And so brands do want to see that you, I mean, not just brands, but like clients in general want to see that you care. And then to take it another step further, like every single meeting I've ever gone into, the person that I'm meeting with is inundated, is too busy, can't get to their email. So if you basically hand them their job on a platter, they can still be the winner in the office. They can be like, yeah, I got this great idea.
Right.
And I got the person
I got
to
a
shoot
deck.
it. Yeah, I got a deck. And you make them look like the superstar. There's no way that they won't at least think about making you the person that is a recipient of the funds that they can spend on behalf of their company.
Right, because I can't tell you how frustrating it is as a brand if you're an influencer and you're not answering your email, or you're a day late. Or I was talking to someone recently, even a day early.
Yeah.
You know, like influencers will be like, you have to post on the 20th, and they'll post on the 19th, and they don't realize that the brand had a whole schedule and the way they wanted to do. You know, and they, but like, it's hard to differentiate yourself online just by your work sometimes,
100%,
right? And I think you're a much better photographer than I ever was, but also.
Too kind.
It's like being a good business person, being a good, pleasant person to work with goes so far.
Yeah,
being
creative is not enough. I mean, it can be.
It can be.
It can be. Really spectacular
it absolutely,
people out there.
absolutely can be, and people will put up with you being a diva.
Totally.
But like that wasn't me ever.
Yeah.
You know, and so it meant that if I said 8 images at 8 a.m., they had to be there at 8
Totally.
a.m. You know,
it was way more efficient than.
And if they're there at 8:30, now all of a sudden your client stuck their neck out for you.
Yeah.
Looks like an idiot.
Totally.
Because their boss emailed them at 8:15 being like, where are the images? Oh, I haven't gotten them yet.
Yeah.
Now you've just made them look bad.
100%.
Right?
It goes both ways.
So you can't do it. So like, I would be interested in just like tips that you have, like you kind of were saying, of just like things that you should be doing when you're working with a client. Like, you know, from the meeting to the end of it, what are you thinking about? Like, how are you closing that deal and making sure you maintain a good relationship with your clients?
I mean, once a new engagement starts, meaning we're at the still point where they're briefing me on what they need, I listen. That's probably one of the hardest things for people to do because they're trying to get to the money piece, but I listen exactly what they need. So if they're asking me to shoot on-figure e-com shots or lay flats, there's a difference, right? So like if I have to shoot things flat on the ground or on a whatever, and that's not something I think I can deliver, I automatically bells go off, okay, don't promise something you can't deliver to a client. Right. So that's like the initial piece of it. Make sure that whatever somebody's asking you for, it's something you can deliver 150%, not just your average like so-so, especially if they're a new client. Yeah. You want to over-impress, right? So that's the first thing. You listen, decide if it's something you can do. And then I get into the first thing, and you've discussed this before, is my main tip is never to give a number. I never give a number first. And if I can't come up with a number myself after they've given me the budget and I say, well, that won't work. If it doesn't fit my scale, then I pass it directly to an agent. And if you don't have that liberty, there's a lot of software out there. Like BlinkBid is something I use as a photographer to understand where the commercial photography rates are. So there's just like you have data to find people. Right. There's something for everything. Yeah. So if you don't know something, don't just haphazardly give away information that you shouldn't give away. So once we agreed that the budget fits, we can make this work, I make sure everything goes in writing first before I start giving away my free ideas. So contracts or whatever your invoice thing, whatever you do that first. And then once we start the process, it's really about having an open dialogue. They're gonna, you have a brief in front of you. If it's a brand, they probably have tenets that they need to stick to, and you don't want to deviate too far from that. So it's about problem solving, seeing what you can do to make whatever their ideas enhanced. My tips are if you have a question, raise your hand. You don't have to, just because somebody's going to you and paying you money doesn't mean you have to act like an expert at every part of every phase of the
you can ask
interaction.
Yeah.
Exactly. So ask questions when you don't know something. If they're telling you that they want to light, but they might light inside, but they might want to do some outdoor stills, ask them like, how many photos do you want from me, and how much of the shoot is going to be inside versus outside? Because these are things you need to know to figure out your EQ, to figure out all these things, right? So having that open dialogue, mood boarding things, Ask the question one more time so I got off track.
This is great. I was going through your client workflow. So like some big things that you put on, over deliver.
Yes.
Huge, right? Especially in the beginning.
Totally.
Oh, if they say 5 images, give them 10, right? That's huge. Get it in writing. You're talking about listening, obviously, mood boarding things out, you know, and then after, then after the, you know, you do the shoot and everything, and obviously you deliver the images. After it, what are you doing?
I will say at the shoot. So one of the things I did early, I wanted to produce. So when I first started photography, like I could only afford a certain amount of equipment,
right?
And sometimes there wasn't rental budgets for everything I wanted, right? So once I started making some money, I decided, okay, I can spend this a couple different ways. I get a better apartment, or I can invest in my business, right? So the first thing I did was I wanted people to feel like they were having the experience of having a tenured photographer. So I invested in the things like the iPad so you can view stuff remotely at home, at wherever you're at. I invested in that. I invested in like little accoutrement like on set that would make people feel like they were shooting with an expensive guy.
Right.
I know.
Like, do you shoot like tethered?
I shoot tethered to a computer.
Like that's huge.
It's huge.
Right.
I don't personally like it all the time.
No,
I don't want
the
you over my
client's
back.
like, oh, well,
yeah, exactly. I don't like the face.
Can you
on
make
that
her
one.
blonde?
Yeah.
It's like, what motherfucker?
I can't do it
Ask
right
for
now.
a brunette.
Yeah. So like, but it's one of those things that basically your whole job is, and I hate to say this in a very Trumpian way, but you're a confidence man.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to make them feel confident in your ability to deliver, so that every step of the way they just feel like they're floating on it.
They're taken care of.
It's easy.
Right.
It's easy.
Their money's well spent.
Exactly.
You're taking care of them. You're taking care of their brand.
I don't show up with a backpack.
Right.
I show up with a Pelican.
Right.
You know, like all those little tiny things that matter to, well, they don't know matter to them, but like if you walk in a room and I can tell you're dressed a certain way, I'll be like, he's not fashion, he's an accountant. Like all these things we do subconsciously, and I make sure that whatever I do will register the right way. So that's in production, the first meetings, whatever. And then after the fact, basically what I do is, I don't know if your photographers use Lightroom or Capture One, but I sort of cull down all my images because no matter who you are, you're probably going to overshoot a little bit.
Right.
And I show them only the best stuff, only the things that are in focus. I let the client be part of the selection process because it's important to them. And then when they give me their images, I either pay retouching or I do it myself because I have some expertise in it.
Right.
And then I deliver the images. And the most important thing that most people don't realize, and I think and maybe it's not that important, but I do it for depending on the client, depending on how much our interaction was, depending on how great it was, et cetera, the minimum I do is send a thank you note, and it's usually something cool that I picked up in like Copenhagen or whatever, a cool postcard with a peace sign or just something interesting, right?
So you'll buy postcards like while you're traveling.
And I keep little
smart
things around the house.
Yeah.
And so I sent a thank you letter or thank you note that just, I hope these images really help drive the business or whatever they were looking for. I answered that in the thank you note. I sent a follow-up email thanking them for everything and hope that we can work together next season. And for clients that I've had a longer relationship with, I had custom candles made from Cold Spring, my favorite place upstate, and I ship candles to people, and just so they have something that's sitting on the desk, and they always, nice. Every time that thing burns, they're like,
throw a link up for Cold Spring here, Tim.
Cold Spring Apothecary, CSA.
Okay. There we go. I think that's, I think a lot of this conversation has been photography focused, but I think it does transcend that quite a bit. I think lending that air of professionalism. I mean, to your point, even bringing having the Pelican case, like it's different.
Yeah,
it's different when you walk in. You're like, oh, I got someone legit.
Totally.
And I think as an influencer, maybe that means, especially if you've got a client on set, right?
Yeah.
And they don't do hair and makeup. Well, maybe you should pay for hair and makeup that day and have it on set, so that client has that experience of feeling like,
100%.
oh, I'm part of this. I'm part of this whole fancy shoot. This is amazing.
Totally. Well, there's people that show up, and this is not like whether you're a photographer, an Instagram blogger, or whatever that you do. There are going to be norms that people expect, right? My girlfriend came home the other day and said, did you hear about that photographer that showed up to a set? There's like 30 people and they pulled out their iPhone and said, let's go. And that's fine if that's what everybody's expecting, right? But if you're young, not that big, not that successful, barely unheard of, like it's your job to make people feel like you're going there at some point,
I mean, I know like we've had photographers and stuff, and obviously I'm a bit of a snob about it, but like we've paid people, or I've seen them shooting, and they won't have L series glass
Yeah.
on their Canon, and I'm like, I know I'm paying you. You know, and like I'm expecting a level of professionalism.
Totally.
And I expect you to know that L series glass is worth the investment.
Right.
You know?
Right.
That
Totally.
you shouldn't be shooting on a $300 lens if you're charging $2,000 a day. Like you just shouldn't. You just shouldn't.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
that's
and
at
like
the
when you
bottom
whip
end of
out
the range
the
too,
the medium format, it's like instantly you're on a different
Totally.
level. You know, you're not just 5D in the kit lens.
Totally.
So I think y'all, if you could think about that in your own businesses, whether you're a photographer or an influencer or your YouTube or whatever it might be, it's like you have to invest in yourself, right? When especially in the beginning, you know, whenever I had money, I bought a lens.
Yeah.
You know, even though I wanted a suit. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why I waited 6 years to get my Tom Brown, because I was buying lenses probably. And also just like keep that air of professionalism. And like you can differentiate yourself in your ability
100%.
to make your clients look awesome.
You can take a picture with a toy camera that'll be better than somebody who didn't really put thought into it.
Right.
Which is the crazy thing, but people don't realize.
Yeah.
You don't need the newest thing every time. You don't, you know. The other thing I would say when you're doing your summation of notes, like save your money. Seriously. I mean, I like
this guy worked at Goldman, so listen to him.
what he said the other day. He was like, I'm using this app. It pulls out a certain amount of money from my account. So if I want to actually do a splurge, I have it separated.
Right.
It's not that thing. It's not my tax money.
Right.
It's not all that stuff. It's separate.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people, they get a little money, then they go on the travel, the trips, the binging, when it's not being paid for or whatever.
Right.
They buy clothes every day. And I'm not the one that's going to stop consumerism. Like I depend on it, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like us especially, I don't usually lump myself in the millennial category, but us as millennials who like spending money on travel experiences and just experiences in general, have to also keep in mind that we're going to want to do that when we're in our retirement.
Yeah.
And nobody's as
Save
a
money.
freelancer, nobody's supporting you anymore.
Right.
It's just you.
I mean, like, and if you're spending all of your money,
Yeah,
I mean,
every
if you're
time the check comes
if
in.
you're saving 5%, if you're only saving 5% of what
That's
you make a
nothing.
year,
Yeah, it's
you're
nothing.
fucked. You're working,
you can't even pay taxes.
You'll work for the rest of your fucking life.
Exactly.
Rest of
And
your life.
I don't think any of your viewers want to do that. So.
No, and nor will we be able to.
No, exactly. So one of the big differences that we mentioned before we taped was like, I'm not an Instagram photographer, I'm an actual photographer. And part of me having a conscious identity in one of my accounts, it being personal, is that I don't want anybody can confuse what I'm doing on Instagram. Like I'm actually, I think, a regular person, and I hope that people make their decisions, like if they buy something that I wore or buy something that I like, you know, I hope they make that decision based on the fact that I'm being as genuine as humanly possible.
Right.
Like I'm not trying to push anything or
you
know, sell anything. If I like something, it goes on my Instagram. If I don't, you never hear about it. You know.
And how much of your work as a photographer, because you say you're a real photographer, and like I know you're not disparaging Instagram photographers.
No.
It's just that you are in a more traditional photography path,
Right?
You know, and are you represented now?
I am represented.
So you're represented. You're doing editorial shoots. You're doing advertising shoots. And so, but like, how much a part of your work that you're getting is coming from social still?
I still think it's a big piece. I think I probably, out of all the shoots, lookbooks, advertising, digital content production, you name it. I think probably social makes up 40 to 45%.
Okay.
It's an inevitability of the way the market's grown. Everybody digests photos in half a second. So if a brand comes to me, there's no way they're going to ask me to shoot something and not ask for usage for social media, and not be conscious about whether we're shooting a good crop that will fit. And everybody cares.
You're obviously conscious of that.
Exactly.
You get it. Like,
and that actually doesn't bother me. Like look, I know that a lot of my work is mercenary versus artistic.
Well, explain that.
Mercenary versus artistic. So basically, I know that there's going to be brands that are coming to me. They like my style, but they really need a job done, and they can trust that I can do it because of my work is good or great.
Right.
But half the jobs are going to be like, we need you to get a job done. We know you can do the work, so just execute on our vision and incorporate your style where you see fit. But let's keep it within our brand voice. And then the other half, the editorials, brands that are young and trying to find their voice, those kind of people come to me and say, we love the way you shoot like this minimalist, cool, edgy feel. Can you do that for us? Or can you interpret our customer into a style that meshes well with, and provide us sort of that framework for the future? And those are where I get to play more of an artist than I get to play like a, hired gun.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that a conscious choice to be like, I'm not going to be the person that's like documenting everything I do and making these like Instagram photos?
Yeah, that's a good question. I purposely don't. And when I started not doing it on purpose, it became a lifestyle for me. Like I just assumed I'm not a blogger, so I would rather this be intentionally just my life. Like I'm just living the way I want to. And if something inspires me, which is how I treat my street photography, my 35mm camera, if something inspires me, I'll pick my camera up and take a picture.
Yeah.
If nothing really.
But you're not sitting there being like, okay, I got a flight today. I got to make sure I get a photo of the flight.
No
so
stunting.
people know.
No stunting.
So people know that I'm going to this place.
No.
And then I can land and I'll go straight to coffee.
I'll get the perfect, top-down Instagram. No, you know what's also awesome about that is like I think it really frees the mind up.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I was trying to grow a following by doing photos like that, then every part of my life would be just sort of programmed in a way. I mean, I guess for some people it comes natural, but for me it doesn't. So I'd have to program my way of thinking, my agenda, all these things, versus like I can just show up somewhere and have no agenda, no plan, and really just feel comfortable in every space and not even think about it, which is fun.
I know you have 2 accounts, right?
Yeah, I do have 2 accounts.
And do you post a lot of what you're shooting for clients on your Buy Bridges account? And Tim will put them both up. He's got a personal account, put it in this hand, and put his professional account in this hand. So sorry, I'm going to distill my question. Do brands ask you to post the work that you're shooting for them? Is it something you ever push back on?
Yeah, so I'll work this question backwards. I have 2 accounts. I decided to separate those 2 accounts because I realized that mixing what is directly fashion work with sort of me hopping on a plane or me at a cool hotel or just a funny picture of the cat at our apartment, I thought that would muddy the waters and sort of make people not understand what direction I was trying to go in. We're talking 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to go in a specific direction. So rewind 3 years ago, the asking whether or not brands asked me to post on my Instagram, when people thought I was a blogger still, all the time. It'd be like, hey, we want you to shoot this thing, caveat, could you also, like, can we work a fee around, like, you throwing a couple images up or whatever? I made a conscious decision when I finally went full-time freelance photographer that I wanted to be a specific type of photographer, fashion photographer, somebody that was taken seriously and not being hired just for the following count. Mm-hmm. So at that point is when I decided I'm not going to invest all my resources and time into developing an Instagram that says one thing or the other. I'm just going to separate these 2 voices, put up photos that I believe in or I love, whether it be brand work or editorial work in this account, and then I'm just going to live my life in this account, and it will still have the blog's name even though I'm not maintaining it anymore. Mm-hmm. But at least people will understand that these 2 things are separate entities. And when I approach a client or meet new people and they want to hire me or interested in my fashion work, I just give them this account. And they might find Tux Style, but at least it says under there, personal account of a fashion photographer. Please see my work here if that's what you're interested in. And I got to be honest, like, even though my mind is very rational and pragmatic and the separation makes a lot of sense, I still get clients from both. So it's like somebody sees me, I guess going on even if I post a picture from a mileage run or something, like for some reason somebody finds my lifestyle work and that tends to be like more smiles or more light, beautiful, sort of like warm feeling. And they still want to go that way because there's so many brands that need that social media voice. And to sell clothes, it's usually not as edgy as somebody like me would like.
Absolutely. And so, like, I guess you answered the question there, but looking back on it, but looking back on it, like, you feel good about the decision to split it because that's it's a fairly big decision to be like, I'm gonna run 2 accounts. So like, you still feel good about it. You think it's a good.
I do. I think, man, so the other challenging part is like, I'm 31. There's a lot of things I'm interested in, and trying to build a followership is not one of them. So I do feel good that I split it because at the time it made the most sense. Maintaining 2 accounts isn't that interesting to me. Mm-hmm. It's like almost double work for no reason. But at the same time, I know it's necessary. So, I listen to these videos, and every once in a while I poke my head around different podcasts to learn about how to do certain things. And one of the ideas I actually came up with was, instead of like Tux Style was my blog or whatever, and my new passion is teaching other people like how to be a good small business or entrepreneur or freelancer. So I'm going to transition Tuck Style into that new voice.
Oh, nice.
So now I actually have a reason to have
Right.
both accounts. It's not just like two
Cats.
it's not just cats. Yeah, exactly.
Although there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it
well,
could
there's
just be
nothing wrong
cats.
with
I
that. My
love
girlfriend
cats.
would love that. But yeah. So the Tuck Style will finally find its own home and be
Right.
called Freelance Kills, which it's a personal brand now. So it is me, and it's what I'm talking about all the time.
Right.
In a very personal way. So now it can feel like it's organic. It's not just a forced like another business account or something.
And I think y'all go to both of those accounts. Tim put them up again, and you will see that like the aesthetic on Vibe Bridges, it is so tight. It's like it's totally cohesive. It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And you're right. If there was a cat photo or a photo of your girlfriend or of Sean Hotchkiss thrown in there, it would be like, this is confusing. What's
I don't know
happening?
what this guy does.
So I think it really makes sense for you, one, in your career path where you want to go, but also because those editorial, professional images are just so much different than the lifestyle images, that they do deserve their own home. So I think, we've gone back and forth on the show talking about it. What should you do? Should you have personal? Should you have different accounts? And I do think if the aesthetic's going to be that much different, it totally makes sense.
One thing I would add too is, and this is from a career development standpoint, like one of the things we're taught when we're in college or when we get our first job is you want to, like if you're in I used to work at a corporate firm, and they were like, if you want to get the big bonus, if you want to become partner one day, you should pick the mentor that you want to, you don't want to necessarily copy everything he's doing, but learn from him. Duplicate his successes so that you can start building your own successes. And again, if I was, a makeup artist or a blogger a style blogger on 4Card, and I wanted to be the next, you name a big blogger like Trope Rouge or somebody like that, then I would try to duplicate what they're doing well and then make it my own.
Iterate
right?
on it.
And so for me, the people that were doing awesome work were like the Mizels and the Lindberghs and all those kind of guys, right? And so they don't care. I mean, they do have followings and such, but they're not over here trying to show you both sides of
their
the
Instagrams
coin.
are terrible.
Yeah, they're horrible.
I remember when Mario Testino launched his Instagram,
like,
I
what?
was like, this is dog shit.
Yeah. They probably have a studio manager putting it together. And
Annie Leibovitz's was terrible.
Yeah.
Like, who's my favorite photographer right now is what's her name? She does the Alex Prager. She does all that like super like surrealist 60s kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Her Instagram is, it's her family and stuff. And she doesn't care about it.
She doesn't
have to.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that like that's unique, and like you're on a different path than a lot of the people in the platform, but we do have a lot of photographers that watch, and I think that like it's good to know that there isn't just photos of landscapes and buildings. Like you can still build a career in a different way. Okay, so
tips and shit.
Yeah, some tips. Everyday person, like let's say, they've got a boyfriend shooting or they're shooting, just like some simple stuff that they can do to make their photos better. Not like, difficult conceptual stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Like, don't shoot every photo at 1:4.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. My first simple tip is use the internet to learn. There's so many options like Skillshare, lynda.com. I mean, I'm self-taught too. I didn't train under anybody, so I had to teach myself everything. So first quick tip, don't be afraid to look at lessons online to hone your skills.
And you said earlier, this was great, you were like, you said something about looking at other people's work and copying it, iterating on it.
Yeah.
And I did that so much. I would
reverse
see
engineer.
A photo online and be like, I'm gonna try and take that photo.
Yeah.
And then you learn in
by
copying
that
it how they did it.
Totally.
Super
Yeah,
important.
I guess that's you take tip number 2.
I know. I was just.
No, that you should say that one all over again.
Yeah, I mean.
Number 2, find somebody's work that you love.
Yeah, I mean, find work. You look on. I love designinspiration.net. I think awesome site. If it's .com, Tim will put it up here somewhere. But I used to go through that site and find photography and save it to different boards and just try and copy it and be like, how do they do that photo?
I think that's
need
the
to
best
figure
way.
it out.
Yeah.
And like a lot of it in the post and getting my post better.
Yeah.
And figuring out how to manipulate colors and curves and all that stuff. And I learned, I did a lot of sitting around looking at like 18-year-old girls talk about editing photos, you know, and they were like doing like, at the time they were like selling like Photoshop actions packages, you know,
Actions
and I would like,
treatments
I would pay for these,
Yeah.
and then I would see what all the steps were. Big, oh, that's cool. They're like, they're pulling
Yeah.
the red down on this,
Totally.
in the shadows in this, and that's how they're getting that purple color in the
100%.
shadows. My point too, I guess, is just a furthering of yours, is like the internet is this place to learn.
Yeah.
And you can learn from courses, and you can also learn by finding photography you love and copying it. And I hope you don't just copy someone's style, but you will learn
from that experiment and then take it and make it your own.
You need to be a student constantly,
100%.
right? All the time.
Can I add on to
Yeah,
that real
please. Let's
quick?
just
And
keep.
then-
Let's snowball.
I was gonna say, man, the thing about being a student. So when I was in college, I fucking hated it. Like I didn't want to be there. Like I hated it. And so after I got out of college, I was so focused on my career. Fast forward, now I'm 31 or 30 is probably when 29 is when this started. But I have this unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and knowledge completely separate from photography. Like I'm reading a book by Richard Dawkins that I brought in. I read books about the future of technology. Like I read books about science, cosmology. I mean, you name it, I'll read it as long as it interests me. And it's incredibly weird to say this, but all the topics that have nothing to do with photography inform my eye even more than just staring at other people's work.
Absolutely.
Because I'm always thinking about other shit.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily have to do with it.
Yeah, because you can read a book and they can describe a scene, and you could think, well, what if I could photograph that scene?
Yeah,
you know, what if photograph could be inspired by this book?
100%.
And I think if you're not curious, if you're a creative and you're not curious, then what do you? I mean, Tim and I were just having this conversation.
We were talking.
Tim and I were just talking about this. I was like, "What are you even reading?" He's like, "I read the New Yorker." I was like, "I love the New Yorker."
It's a great. Yeah,
but the New Yorker is a news.
Yeah.
It's news. It's not inspiration so much. You know, and you will be a smarter, more interesting, more informed person. But you also need to read Pale Blue Dot or you know, Lolita or Anna Karenina or whatever. You know, to kind of fill that.
You got to branch out. You definitely have to branch out.
Absolutely.
Totally. And you know, I hate to riff and not answer your question, but
the
last riff before the next tip would be that, like you were saying when we ended with the Copenhagen notes and all that stuff, is like I do think within reason we owe it to ourselves to inform our eye by going to places that you haven't already seen 1,000 times on Instagram. So avoiding Tulum and going to the small village, or going to Copenhagen instead of Paris, or going to a small town outside of Tokyo or Osaka.
I think that's important for, you know, it's probably even worse for our influencers, right? Because they're doing that 4 times a day. They're posting 5 times a day.
It's
you know,
tough.
and like, and we were talking earlier about like taking the perfect coffee photo, but like I can't do that shit.
Yeah.
You know, like I literally like can't shoot that well.
Yeah.
Like if you were like take a photo like a guy named Patrick's like flat legs of his coffee, I would be like, there's as much chance of me doing. I can't do it.
Me neither.
Right? He's like the Sally Man of
world.
coffee photos. You know, like how the fuck are you doing this? But these people, it's constant, and I think that like that point is we're diverging certainly from the brief, but we're drunk. So like, what are you gonna do? But it's important because I think you need that space to get re-inspired, right?
Space.
And I think your followers will be there in a week.
Yeah.
And I think that everyone could benefit from taking a break. I know some bloggers that do like, you know, people do like no booze January, which I don't support
Wait, what is
at
that
all.
called?
Like no booze January, you know, like they don't drink.
Not drinking?
Yeah.
God.
Like I don't support that shit. But I know some influencers that will like pick a month and do no sponsored posts.
Oh, that's good.
And I think that's
healthy.
I think that's really good. You know, to be like, let's just go back to like why I started this, which is like talking about clothes I love.
Yeah, and if you're making
wardrobe.
money and you're doing a good job of making that money, you should be able to create that space for yourself and not have to worry about a month.
Even if it's a week, even if it's a weekend, you know, and I, you know, to just like get that space.
100%. Yeah.
Whose turn is it? Your turn for a tip?
Tip number 3 or 4.
It doesn't matter.
Whatever tip.
10.
I would say. I got it. Taking a picture on a DSLR is similar to an iPhone in that when you're shooting in a bright day and the sky's all blown out, you want to sort of try to meter between the brightest spot and the darkest spot in the photo so that you get the range of colors and luminosities, and it's easier to edit the photo. So if it's like a rainy day over and there's no blue sky or whatever, you want to try to get as dark as you can, get the sky as dark as you can while still keeping the person in good luminosity.
Right.
So that after the fact, you can pull your highlights in and try to get as much of that sky back in the photo so you don't have like all city and beautiful backdrop and then blank white.
Right.
If you can. That tends to be really hard on all white days, but on a day where it's like light blue, not rich and saturated blue, that'll be a way to help you get the healthy balance between lights and darks.
And people, I understand the language you're speaking, but people who don't understand that language, let me just like, is that something that you take, again, I know you have a brain now where you can look and be like,
I don't even think about
you can
it.
be like, oh, that's 281, you know, ISO 400 and one, you know, 320. But are they using the light meter in the camera? Are you taking multiple photos and looking at how they are?
See,
how
I
are
love
you?
this conversation because this is going to, I'm looking at Tim instead of the camera, sorry. But this is actually lending itself to another tip. So we'll work backwards. So the next tip I was gonna say was, a lot of people talk about what camera lens, what camera to have. But I also think that even if you're not gonna be some professional photographer, one of the things that anybody can benefit from is buying a light meter. You can get an analog one and they cost maybe less than 150 bucks, but it can take your work or understanding your exposure, and exposure meaning brightness, darkness, whatever, to the next level, because you're not doing so much guesswork. When you're looking through a camera and you see that little meter at the bottom and you're trying to move your shutter speed to go left or right on the little arrow, like that only tells you your spot focus or an average of the scene. But if you use a light meter, which has a like white dome on the front, it gives you sort of the perfect blend of everything that's going on 180 degrees in the scene. It helps you dial in where you actually need to be shooting that shot. And even if you look at the back of your camera and go, this isn't quite, like it's a little too dark or a little too light, the fact that you metered the scene perfectly based on the light meter and versus the spot meter in your camera will allow you, when you go do your Lightroom edits, to have a little bit more, if you're using a Canon 5D or 7D,
You're gonna be in like a better spot.
A little bit more spot to like tweak it back and forth.
As long as you're shooting raw.
As long as you're shooting
Don't
raw.
fucking shoot JPEGs.
Don't shoot JPEGs.
Come on,
it's a waste
people.
of time.
It's just harsh.
And it's not that much more space.
It's interesting. I've never had a light meter my entire life,
Yeah, and
I think that like I could probably benefit from it.
Yeah, we all could.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, like, so everybody that learns photography probably learns by shooting friends or walking around outside and taking photos, and that's the easiest way to learn. It's the cheapest way to learn. But when you start getting indoctrinated and actually having to do client briefs, which are outside, they're inside, even outside when you have to light and you have to meter with ambient or kill ambient or all these studio concepts, like that will really hone your sort of technical knowledge for using your own camera. Because if you don't even know the first thing about the exposure pyramid, then you won't even understand how anything works.
Right.
It
is, I think I'll throw a tip out there and say, like, the camera is another language. It's a fairly simple language, but the first week or two is difficult. And I think you need to, if your job is taking photos, even if a lot of it's on the iPhone, you will always benefit by taking better photos. And if you don't know the difference between aperture and exposure and ISO and shutter speed, and all of these things, and you don't know what that little thing that's going on your camera does, then you are doing yourself a massive disservice. And you need to spend a week or two on manual, walking around, fucking it up.
Yeah, totally.
And trying stuff, because otherwise you're just at the mercy of everybody else. And I know photographers, like influencers that work with photographers, and they get their images back and they're like, I don't like these, why? And I'm like, well, he shot the whole thing at 1.4. So it's crazy blown out. But if you knew what you were saying, you would say, oh, well, I shoot my outfit photos at 4.5.
Yeah, totally.
And make sure the shutter speed doesn't go below 1/320, or your hand might shake and it could get a little blurry. But if you don't know that, you could ruin an entire shoot.
100%.
Especially even if it's, if you're working with a photographer, they should know that. But if you're working with your friend or your boyfriend and they've got it on AV, but the ISO is at 100 and it's cloudy out, then all of a sudden your shutter speed is going to be at 160.
Oh,
and I know
completely.
a lot of this doesn't make any sense, but like if it doesn't make sense, if you can't
Research
understand,
every word we're saying,
if you can't understand what we're saying, like you need to learn it, because you need to know on a cloudy day at 4 o'clock in the winter when it's a little dark, if you're on AV and 2.8
Yeah.
and the shutter speed's at 160, that your shit's gonna look terrible.
Or if it's full of snow, you're gonna have way more light than you thought you were gonna
You're
have.
gonna be blown out.
Yeah.
So like, if you don't, I just hit my microphone, I'm sorry, Tim. If you don't know these things, you can't tell your friends or you can't just like set the camera up and hand it to them.
Exactly.
You know?
That adds a tip. Okay, here's a tip. If you want to train your boyfriend how to use a camera, he'll actually love this more than taking the digital photos of you. Buy him a point and shoot film camera. Buy him like 3 rolls of film, 35 millimeter. It's cheap. You can get it anywhere. And then tell him, go out there and take some photos. Have some fun. Let's go to the museum. Let's go to the Whitney.
Right.
Let's take some photos inside. Let's take some pictures
That's
of
great.
the skyline.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, he's going to go online and figure out how to use it. Because we all do that shit. Once he figures out how to use it, he's gonna be relentless and trying to figure out how to make his picture good.
Right, because the first roll
Because the first
is
roll
terrible. And then you're like, the next roll I'm gonna get it.
I gotta get it, and it just builds.
Yeah,
And if you shoot film, and I'm not like one of those guys. Whenever I see a photographer go hashtag like 35 millimeter, I cringe. I'm like, you don't need to tell anybody. Just do it for you.
It's camera.
It's a camera. We all take photos.
Right.
But I think it is an instrumental part of learning. The best photographers, or some of the coolest and best photographers that we've ever had in history were sports photographers. They used to shoot manual all the time, shooting moving football players, tackling people, 35 millimeter on a long thing that you had to hand hold or use a little tiny
the monopods.
And they would have tack sharpness.
Yeah.
I mean, that shit is incredible.
Right.
That's way better than I am.
That's
I can barely focus without glasses.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Buy your boyfriend a film camera. I had this amazing photographer, Ben Ingham, who used to shoot all the work for Rafa. Shot sports photography on a film Leica.
Oh, amazing.
It's just like, how are you shooting sports photography on a rangefinder?
Yeah.
What the fuck? That's
totally.
insane.
It's insane. But it's so awesome when you can nail it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last one.
The last tip would be, and I think you already covered this in another class, but don't be afraid of auto. And 3 years ago, I'd have been like, oh, you use auto? You're whack, right?
Yeah.
But I've been
cameras are smart.
The cameras are smart. I've been on the circuit so many times, like just doing street style. I don't really do it anymore, but I've been around Tommy Ton, Scott Schumann. You name the street style photographer that gave bloggers the platform to take street style photos. Like, I've been with all of them, hung out with them, drank with them, chilled with them, froze my fingers to frostbite with them. And my toes, obviously.
Yeah.
But the one thing I learned, and I will never name a name, but one thing I learned was one of the best ones, and there's like 10 best ones, let's say that, to make it big, started on auto. AV all the time.
Right.
Because he had to go from shooting a street scene to behind the scenes, and in order to worry more about composition and not to be fucking thinking about like, oh my God, should I jack my ISO up? To do that, he had to sort of improvise.
Right.
And so using auto and relying on it like it's a crutch and you have a broken leg, that'll kill you in the long run. But using it to help fill in the gaps.
I still use AV when I'm
not
walking.
a problem.
If I'm just like walking around.
Yeah, especially if your boyfriend's shooting, because maybe he's not perfect yet.
Right.
You rather get photos you can use every time you go out.
It's really, really well.
Yeah.
Look, thank you so much for coming, man.
Awesome.
I think we're gonna have you on like every 6 months because you've got an amazing. We don't think we answered any of the questions we set out to. We just like started talking. And 45 minutes later,
well, you need to come on my podcast at some point when it starts really going, because I think people would benefit from both this kind of dialogue.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.